Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Campbell, a business analyst with the Food Institute. And on behalf of myself and DMA, I'd like to welcome you all to this afternoon's webinar, Winning Operators, Bold Predictions, the third installment of DMA's Convening Food Service Leaders series. Today, we welcome four of the industry's most influential leaders to understand how their brands are winning today, and maybe even more importantly, their bold predictions for who will win in 2021. But before we start, I'd like to introduce the Food Institute to those who may not be familiar with us. We at the Food Institute have been serving the industry for over 90 years with news, market data, and trends in the food service, manufacturing, and retail sectors. This year, there are some exciting developments that I'd like to highlight. In 2020, we launched the Food Institute podcast series, a series featuring interviews with top industry executives. We also launched a weekender newsletter providing a review and preview of key events impacting the food industry. Our new website is currently being deployed and will include more interactive content. And lastly, we updated our Food Institute report for our professional and e-members, which is geared more towards industry research on major food trends. So I ask that you please consider becoming a member by going to foodinstitute.com/joinfi. So with that said, I'd like to thank DMA again for having us and to quickly introduce today's guests. Wendy Davidson will be moderating our discussion today. Wendy is the Kellogg Company's president of U.S. Away From Home. And previously, Ms. Davidson worked as vice president and general manager for the U.S. and Latin America for McCormick and Company and spent over 15 years as part of the executive team at Tyson Foods, Inc. Kelli Valade, president and CEO of Black Box Intelligence, will open our discussion with a brief overview of how the industry has fared since the start of the pandemic and recent trends. Kelli started in the restaurant industry at 16 as a hostess and has since taken on executive roles with TGI Fridays, On the Border Mexican Grill and Cantina, and Brinker International before joining Black Box Intelligence. Noodles and co-CEO Dave Beninghausen joins us for today's session as well. He has been with Noodles since 2004, where he held positions ranging from VP of Finance to CFO before taking the role of CEO. And he received a BS in Finance and Marketing from Truman State University and holds an MBA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business. And additionally, Craig Culver, founder of Culver's franchising system, will round out our panel. In 1984, Craig and Leah Culver, along with Craig's parents George and Ruth, opened the very first Culver's in the family's beloved hometown of Sauk City, Wisconsin, and began serving Butterburgers and frozen custard. So just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and a link to the video will be provided after the end of the webinar to all registrants following a small processing period. So with that said, I'll hand it off to Kelli to get us started.
Great. Chris, are you going to share the screen? Because I'm not seeing it as I was before.
And it should be up now.
There we go. Great. So good afternoon to those tuning in, and so appreciative of the opportunity to do this today and to kick off what will be, I know, a fantastic discussion with this esteemed panel. So I am in the role of in the role I'm playing today. I'm really just going to set up with a few slides, set up via the information, insights, and trends we are tracking at Black Box Intelligence. On behalf of the team, we are based here in Dallas, Texas. We are, I like to say, small but mighty. This is the portfolio of products that we do have. We specialize in the restaurant industry. For those that don't know of us, we have 4 products where we are tracking sales, traffic, workforce trends, guest sentiment trends, and even broader consumer macro trends on behalf of the industry. I've spent my entire career, as you heard, in the industry, and it is our passion and our purpose to help operators thrive, especially right now. So the data I'll be sharing is real data from our subscribers. We have over close to 300 brands in the portfolio, people that subscribe to our services, and I'll be building off of that as I share the insights and data that we are seeing today and have been tracking throughout this pandemic. So with that, and just so you have some context of where we are getting the information that we're sharing, I will begin to kind of talk you through what's been happening. Let me back us up. Okay, so this is the information that we have really up to the last couple of weeks. I can tell you this recovery, as so many of you now know, this is not new information necessarily, but this is at a glance what has been happening during this pandemic. It has been devastating. We know that. I will show you in a minute that it has been different for regions. It's been different. It's been different regionally. It's also been different by segment. But nonetheless, it's this pandemic has hit us very hard in this industry, the industry that we all love. It has recovered. The recovery started to flatten out as cases started to spike in July and then, early August. it's leveling off and starting to, it's growing a little bit more each week. In fact, our last week's data, not shown here, shows us at just about 9%. I'm sorry, my finger is hitting that too often here. It is still a tale of two cities. This has been the case since from the very beginning, and we'll talk a little bit more throughout this conversation about the fact that if you have a digital presence, if you have a drive-through, if you have the ability to get your food in the hands of more consumers via off-premise, you are doing better and faring better. So this is the story that has been the case since the very beginning. It is a tale of two cities. It is about limited service doing far better than full, just for the simple fact that dining rooms were closed. And it became really a story of how quickly could you get your product in the hands of more people to go or through a delivery provider. Not going to be the focus today, but nonetheless, that's been a part of the story. The other part of the story that we know is really important is that even when you look at cuisine type growth, and for those food service providers, distributors, manufacturers that may be listening in, the cuisine type growth is absolutely correlated to the type of experience. And what I mean by that is some of the strongest brands and some of the strongest cuisine type sales are those brands that are also quick service or fast casual. You could see that chicken, hamburger, and pizza very obviously there. We also track with a product that we have looking at credit card spend, we track consumer at an even more macro level. So what I would tell you is, again, for the broad and diverse audience that we're talking to today, we thought this was relevant as well. Wine and liquor sales, so those memes around vodka at 9 a.m. for breakfast in a pandemic, those are all true. Wine and liquor sales are in the winning categories, online grocery and meal kits in the winning categories. And then you would see full service, obviously, at the bottom. Limited service would come in around number 20 on this same graph if I were to look at Q2 versus Q1 in our data set. 10% of restaurants are still closed. We get asked that question at Black Box all the time. 10% are still closed. That's been consistent for about the last 7 weeks. And again, something to remember, I mentioned we have over 300 brands. We represent all segments and have good penetration across the country. We don't have independents. This is probably higher. And there's no one that has a really great grasp of how many independents, but it's probably closer to 15, 18% if you think about those independents that perhaps are closed today still and may not reopen. So it's again, just a devastating time for so many. We asked in one of our last webinars, so at Black Box, we do webinars often, and we asked in one of our last webinars, what do you see happening most, what are you most worried about? And what are you most, again, losing sleep over post-COVID? And so what I thought was interesting is there's a lot of answers there. Biggest, as you know, with a Wordle or word cloud, the biggest words are the ones mentioned most often, but business, primarily, how can I sustain in this environment is really the thing we hear most from our customers. And then safety of my employees and safety of my guests comes up most often. We also asked recently on a survey, how has this impacted? We all know the impact of sales and traffic. We all know the differences that have been happening by now. The duration of this thing has been one of the biggest surprises and one of the things most difficult. We now know the duration will continue. It's going to continue at this pace probably until there's a vaccine. So the estimated impact, I thought this was interesting and perhaps a little bit understated, perhaps reflecting the chain environment where, again, we do work with some of the best in the chain environment that have been able to absorb some of the costs. I think this would be different if you were looking at independence, but nonetheless, this is a tough margin environment anyway, regardless of then having to add staff and add different positions just to handle this pandemic, or just not be able to predict what's happening from week to week, given changes in opening procedures, et cetera. One of the other things I said I would do is really just kind of round this out. I'll talk next about consumer, and then I'll talk about the employee. Lots of conversation around sales and traffic, lots of conversation around off-premise. We've talked about it, we've kind of been there and done that, and we know where things probably will stay for the time being. When it comes to the consumer, we uniquely can comment on what consumers have been talking about. We buy from the social platforms of Facebook, Google, TripAdvisor, Yelp, Instagram. We buy from all those to give a sense for what consumers are saying, and we do this for our customers, but in a broad sense, I can tell you what they've been saying at the macro level about restaurants right now. And so we've been tracking it since the very beginning. I did a simple screenshot here of May, June, and July, just to give a sense for some of the things we're talking about. masks, and more mask conversations as if there hasn't been enough is really what they're talking about. In May, when restaurants started to open back up, Georgia, Texas, one of the first 2 states to do that, one of the things we heard loud and clear was if you have a procedure, it's expected that you'd see them with all employees, expected that gloves would be seen. And if you are saying that on your website, but it's not happening in the restaurant, very quickly you are going to hear about it. Service started to pop up, people being very grateful. If you help me feel safe, I'll show you I'm grateful. So in June, we started to see great service scores, great food scores, and just a resurgence of I'm in a restaurant, I feel safe, and then I'll give you credit. There'll be a halo on the rest of the experience for that. When we got to July and cases surged in restaurants, yes, we're open at limited capacity, but dining rooms were open. We started to hear more about, again, the same protocol, but cleanliness, as we are now saying, is the new ambiance. It is the new ambiance and atmosphere. Nothing matters more than making sure things are clean. They'll call it out if it's not clean. They'll call it out if they see people not, following the protocol that you have said is most important. And I added this, not our research, this is from Lisa Miller Associates, a partner of ours and someone we work with to just share broader insights. And this I thought was fascinating. So this is of the things that were high incidence for people that had visited restaurants and had ventured out. Those that had gone out, they really commented on a couple things. They weren't necessarily good news for restaurants. In the lower left quadrant was things like, I didn't see all the employees wearing masks. On the right top, high incidence and less satisfaction was really about the customers not wearing masks, which we now know a lot more big brands are not only suggesting but enforcing that customers wear them as well. But also I wanted to lean into this just a bit maybe for the discussion that we'll hear from our panel, but my favorite item wasn't there. It was commented on, however, it has not been as much of an issue. People understand that if you had to make changes in your model during COVID, they're understanding of that more than ever, that their favorite item might not be there. And so I thought that was fascinating. I dug a little deeper, tried to unpack that because I think it's so critical as a former operator myself, so critical to understand if this is a time where you could make changes to simplify things for your operators, highly would recommend you do. And it's not showing up in dissatisfaction. Actually, it's commented, maybe it wasn't there, but they're also not expecting it to be business as usual. And if they're safe and it's clean, they're going to give you credit for that and not necessarily worry about it as much right now. So it could mean really good things strategically for brands right now in thinking about how they make the lives of their operators easier. It's a great segue to the workforce because, again, we talk about how the guest is responding. We talk about how we're getting more food to more people via off-premise and delivery and a digital brand, all really relevant today. Those things are going to stay in place. Those trends will stay. The workforce model, however, and what these operators are having to do right now, no one's ever seen anything like it. They're working harder than they ever have. And the model was challenged before. And what I mean by that is we've been tracking workforce statistics for close to 25 years at Black Box. Turnover was a problem before. Staffing levels we've been tracking and know that chronically understaffing had been the issue leading up to the pandemic. So we know those things are still an issue. And it's further complicated, of course, by what's been happening in this pandemic. So this one breaks my heart as a former server and someone that spent my entire career in this industry, that our frontline servers that are putting themselves out there are also dealing with people that don't agree with whatever policy is happening at that time or whatever is happening in the restaurant. So it's not their fault, and yet they are on the front lines having to deal with these kind of things, right? So it's just something that everyone on this call I know is aware of. The loneliness epidemic, this is something I talk about every chance I get, having managed human resources and managed operations, knowing this is before the pandemic, that people were saying, I am lonely for as connected as people are with every device possible. People were saying at a 60% positive, yes, I'm lonely and don't have close, intimate relationships before COVID hit. So I can only imagine, and we are starting now to feel the toll that this entire thing has been taking on people. So with that, we also know that, sorry, I'm trying to click and my screen is frozen. 1 second. All right, there we go. We also know social unrest is a big part of the commentary, it's happening with the guests and it's happening with your employees. So they are absolutely commenting on if this has got to be a brand where you're paying attention. George Floyd and everything that happened before, that will continue to be something where people are looking to you, your brand, and wanting to know the statement you make on your website and everything that they can find out about you. So social unrest, staffing issues, guest issues right now, and then on top of that, you've got this idea of, am I really feeling connected? So well-being coming out of this is going to be critical. I get asked all the time, our answer on this, in terms of will the industry be the same, is it will be the same, but different. Recovery is going to take longer. We know that now. You got to deliver on safety. It's the first and foremost thing you have to deliver on. Digital innovation, not for maybe today's discussion, but it is table stakes. And then the workforce model requires attention. It needs everyone's attention in terms of what these employees are going to need from you going forward. The last slide I have, which I am working on getting up here. Here we go. So the last slide I had was just what do we think is temporary? And I want to give Wendy maybe a jumping off point, but what do we think is temporary and what do we think is permanent? Safe is temporary. The joy and delight of being out in a restaurant and being seen will come back. But right now it's safe. You can demonstrate being seen and being connected without physically being connected. The digital footprint and presence digitally will matter, and those that have that footprint, it will win, because I think that's a permanent shift. And then finally, again, the workforce model, there's work to be done there. There's absolutely work to be done there. So I'd like to think that there's a reason to be optimistic that we're about halfway through an incredibly difficult year, but with operators like we have today who have some amazing stories, I know a lot can be done. So hopefully that sets the stage, Wendy, for a great jumping off point for you. Thank you again so much for the time to set that up.
No, that's great, and I think it is a great jumping off point, Kelli. And thank you so much for the insights. I don't know how everybody else feels, but it gets my mind thinking about not just my own business, but also my customers and the broader industry. So I'm going to tee it up, both Dave and Craig. We'll start with you, Dave. What's your initial reaction to Kelli's information?
Yeah, I thought that Kelli hit on all the high points that we've been living over the last several months, but I think one thing that I hope the audience takes away is some of that focus, not just on safety, but on the workforce. We have seen, everybody knows the acceleration of trends that were already occurring in terms of convenience, in terms of digital. So no real surprises there. But I think a telling slide that was shown was the 60% of people that felt lonely prior to COVID. We see this throughout our organization in terms of the desire for our employees to feel connected and to be part of something. The way that the workforce has changed in the restaurant space is remarkable in the 16 years I've been at Noodles and Company. And so I absolutely 100% agree with everything Kelli presented, with a particular focus on the importance of the workforce as we move forward.
That's great. Craig, from your perspective?
Well, I've been battling trying to get back on, and so I didn't hear everything that Kelli was saying. But as far as what we've been doing, and we've been doing quite well, we fit into that fast, the quick service mode. We're at least 6% above where we were last year, and last year we had a record year. So because of the drive-through, we've done extremely well. We've been masked from just about the get-go. I was really, when I saw that one slide where no tip because they didn't like the mask, that hurts. I mean, that hurts. That somebody just trying to do their job and doing it right, and somebody takes a different stance. But we've been masked, and as far as our team is concerned, just talking to our HR people this morning, we're fully staffed. We really haven't even lost people. We don't even have to hire additional people right now. So I'm very proud of that. So.
Yeah, I think in building off what Craig said as well, I think what's been unique is the urgency that the industry has had to react and adjust aggressively. And so the the pressure that we put on the operations teams early on, especially in terms of how things were changing, whether it be food safety protocols, overall employee just processes, shift towards curbside for Noodles and Company. I mean, that work that they did allowed us to have our recovery without benefit of many drive-throughs. We've been able to get sales back to what they were pre-COVID. But the amount of pressure that put on the operations team and the amount of pressure that put on the leadership team to balance that sense of urgency to mitigate business impact, recover sales, with ensuring their safety and ensuring that they don't get burned out, that has been a challenge I don't think any of us were necessarily prepared for. And we're seeing a bit of a bifurcation of the concepts that were able to navigate through that and those that didn't.
I'd be curious too, as you think about those areas of pivot, and you mentioned this, Dave, the early on crisis of the moment and managing for the business, and then very quickly to the what's next. We've seen a lot of businesses do things for their workforce, but also engaging in community and engaging in the industry as a way not just to help neighbors, but also to create that connectivity. We know people are lonely, and so this has provided that sort of outlet. What's your business done in creating some of that workforce engagement?
Yeah, I think, and Craig should certainly touch on Culver's as well, because I think they share a lot of similarities. We've had the fortune of going into COVID, having quite a bit of investment that we've done on our workforce that helped to increase a lot of the retention, a lot of the turnover, tenure metrics. We very early on started with staffing, and we started with understanding what was going to be the impact on individual restaurants, mitigating and not doing many furloughs, and that helped us quite a bit as sales recovered. But I think the most important thing was just a lot of transparency, a lot. And we did fail fast in terms of some of our testing. Like we tested a take and bake approach. We looked at grocery, some of the things that a lot of other brands have done. We were very transparent with our operations teams on here's rationale on how we're pivoting, why we're pivoting this way. And while we did that, we also did thank you bonuses. We closed our restaurants during the 4th of July, instituted emergency paid sick leave, really activated our foundation, which impacted about 10% of our team. We were able to provide extra funds through that. So it was a full court press in terms of getting them as engaged in the process as possible.
That's great. And Craig, I know you've got a really almost a cult following with Culver's in the markets where you're at. How have you engaged your workforce and also in the work that you've done in community?
You know, when this all got started back in March, early March, I mean, I for one was thinking, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? Well, that lasted a couple days, and then I started thinking, hey, wait a second, this is our time to shine. You know, we're gonna have, you know, and poor them. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of other restaurants were gonna close, and here we are, we're still open, and we're still running drive. Well, what we learned is we got to get better at the drive-through than what we are. You know, we're the slowest fast food restaurant in the world, but yet I'm proud of that. But we had to get better at that, and our teams have shined. From our support center, getting our stores ready, you know, learning and getting them ready for this once we got into it, and teaching our teams in the restaurants of how to deal with this. And by the way, we also had a lot of scared people in our restaurants as well, our team members. Nobody knew. I mean, we all were scared. But, you know, once we got going, we put things in place, and now we got half the restaurants, about 70% of our restaurants have dining rooms open now, you know, at 50%. Once we got things in place and stuff, our people felt more and more comfortable. And like I said just prior, we haven't lost people. We are in a solid position. As far as the community is concerned, we're fortunate. We've gained a reputation over the many years, over 36 years, running a clean operation. Cleanliness has always been crucial certainly to us, but it is with every restaurant. But people have faith in us. They've just learned to have faith in us, and they've been so good to us over this thing, and actually over the years they have. But the community is a big player for us. It always has been. We are part of the community, and they have taken care of us. They have. So
that's great. That's great. I do want. There was one thing that Kelli talked about around menu items and simplification of the menu. And Kelli, I'd like you to weigh in here as well. In what ways Kelli, have you seen restaurants streamlining menus? And I'd love to know, Dave, from your perspective, and Craig, any changes you've had to make to your menu because of supply chain challenges or just workforce simplification. So I'll start with Kelli.
Yeah, it's a great question, great point. And I think it's one of those, outcomes, as Craig said, first there was shock and awe and what are we going to do? And then it's what can we take advantage of? I call it out as an opportunity to just maybe think differently in terms of how difficult the job is today. We all know that, and we've talked about that, how difficult this is going to continue to be for operators. So I curiously started to dig into our own data, wondering if that was the case. And to your question, Wendy, specifically, yes, I've had our customers come to us and say, it looks like this might be a better time than ever to consider those changes, because it's a very difficult thing. I did this in a former life at Chili's and reduced the menu significantly. It is not easy to do that. But what we're seeing now is perhaps there will be more understanding. And then, the longer this goes on, the more, again, that understanding of it may look different for the time being. Their memories may be short. They may just be comfortable with where you end up. So I've got several clients saying, we're suggesting this be permanent. Is it showing up as a dissatisfier? And the answer is no, not yet, at least. Now, when things are back to normal, the new normal, as much as I don't like that saying, will they expect to see their favorite items back? I certainly can't comment, but I think it might be an easier Band-Aid to rip off than perhaps ever before.
That's great. Dave?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with Kelli. And what you see, obviously, necessity being the mother of invention. We were fortunate in that sales recovered back to prior levels pretty quickly. But that first couple of weeks, every concept, I believe, experienced that huge shock. And so looking at where's value not being added? What are the things that are most important for the brand? This was certainly an opportunity for us. We did some streamlining, and we'll continue to look at it. I also think that's what's an unsung hero in this is as people move towards digital, the traditional static menu boards that you see within a restaurant versus in a digital world where you're able to show so much more customization, so much more personalization. From the guest perspective, they see just as much variety, sometimes even more, than what they saw in a world where they weren't necessarily engaging with the brand as digitally as they were. So we introduced Perfect Bowls, which allows you to just quickly navigate to a keto-friendly, vegetarian-friendly, paleo-friendly type offering. It gives the appearance of more variety, but it doesn't impact the operations negatively because it is the same type of dishes that we've been making already, just be customized to those dietary preferences.
What would be your advice, Dave, to a supplier that's working with you as you're driving menu simplification so that they're bringing you solutions that maybe cross the menu rather than something that might be really exciting innovation with limited use?
Yeah, I think SKU utilization and being able to cross-utilize it across many different platforms is extremely important, and being extremely transparent with in problem-solving orientation of here's something you should be looking at. Here's what we're seeing from other concepts of certain ingredients, whether it be avocado, bacon, you name it, that can be utilized in a lot of different food platforms. So I would say transparency is key though, because we have the same goal here, and that we all want to make money. And I think that we recognize the demands that the distributors have and suppliers have in terms of their own plants, their own requirements. And so if we work together, and you can have quite a bit more innovation. I think that's another benefit of the streamlining that's occurring, is it's going to pave the way for better innovation in 2021 and beyond.
We know that one of the, and Craig, I want this question for you, but really for you and Dave to answer. One of the trends that we saw leading into COVID was a drive to locally sourced and sustainability around packaging, sustainability around agriculture. And I know, Craig, you've done some great media advertising around local farms, but also connectivity to the community. How has COVID impacted your focus around sustainability, or has it helped accelerate that?
I don't think it really hasn't changed, and we've got such a long ways to go in that area. It's an area that's very important to me. I want our restaurants to be more green, but buying locally, with a chain of almost 800 restaurants, it's impossible. It just is not possible for us. And there's chains that have gotten in trouble because they have promoted that, and then issues happen in the restaurants, and they don't know where that product is coming from. You got to know where the product is coming from, where it's sourced. So if there is an issue with food safety, you know right where to go. And, I recall the good old days, and when we bought the cabbage locally, we bought the tomatoes locally. You can't do that with 800 restaurants. As far as consistency in the restaurants, it would be all over the board. As far as slimming the menu down, I really don't want to do much more of that. We've gotten rid of a number of items over the years. Some of them I was in total disagreement with getting rid of, but this COVID thing has actually slimmed our menu down. We don't have pork tenderloins yet on the menu. Then we're expecting them back in October sometime, and people that worked really hard during this period was supply chain. Oh my gosh, the challenges they faced, all the paper products. We're still we've got the generic paper bags in our restaurants yet. Every order was going into a paper bag because we had no indoor dining. It was all drive-through, and a number of paper products that became in short supply. And Dave, you're absolutely right. We've got to be transparent, actually, with everybody that we deal with, including bankers. You better be transparent with a banker, by the way. But your distributors and stuff. Hey, you're right. It's we're in this together, and we all want to do the right thing, and then you got to be transparent with each other. So we have always tried to do that. I believe in win-win relationships. I believe when you're putting too much pressure on a supplier or distributor or what have you, you're probably going to lose that supplier or that distributor. And we want to win, and we want our suppliers and distributors to win as well.
What's been the most successful pivot that either your business has personally done or that you've seen done in this time of COVID? Dave?
I think for us, the biggest pivot has been how we talk with our teams and how we communicate the importance of their role in society in general. And there was a time frame, very early on where, we're reminding them how noble food is as a profession. And so many important events that happen in our lives happen over a meal. I adopted my first son, or my wife and I, from Taiwan. I remember every single meal that first week that we were with them. And there is something remarkable about this industry. I think it's even more important now than ever. Any just quick glance at social media, you see the amount of hatred and vitriol of stranger versus stranger. The world needs restaurants to step up and have a responsibility towards providing connection and providing a respite from that type of environment. And we talk with our general managers often about we have a lot of high schoolers in our restaurants, as I'm sure Craig does as well. Outside of their parents, most people aren't getting nobody's having more influence on how they view the world, how they view service, how they view other human beings, than the manager of one of our restaurants. And that's a pretty awesome responsibility and a big opportunity. We've been already pushing that pre-COVID for sure. But I think the pivot to even emphasizing that more has been something we've been really focused on in the last few months.
I love that, especially the idea of manager as coach, but also as mentor to future leaders.
You know, I've always said we have the opportunity with each and every team member and with each and every guest that walks into our place of business to make a difference. Put a smile on a face. And, you know, that's something I've talked about forever with our team members, but it's got to start with them. They have got to take care of each other as well. They've got to think of each other not only as team members, but as guests as well in the restaurant. And when they do that, you can really form a great team. But it's got to have, as Dave said, it's got to have a leader. Somebody's got to be that leader that's setting the tone. I've always said if I walk into our restaurants or our support center every day and I'm wearing an ugly face and just a jerk, guess what I'm going to get in return? I'm going to get that same person. Well, that's where our leaders, when they've got to set the tone in our restaurants and in the support center, wherever. And then I'll tell you what, our people will take care of our guests and each other like my mother would take care of them. I so strongly believe that. And with what's going on right now, boy, you're right, Dave. We need it. We need it more than ever. And restaurants do that. That's the wonderful thing about being in our business. We can put smiles on faces just by being a good person, just by having a good heart, just by saying please or thank you and my pleasure, but you can't fake it. It's got to come from the heart. And that's what our industry does. And I'm so proud of that. I'm so proud of our industry for being those people.
Boy, I love that. I absolutely love that. And I'm along those lines. I'm going to sort of pivot to some of the audience questions and back to some of the ones that we'd planned, just because I'm going to tap into, Craig, what you're talking about. And the question here was really specific to Culver's. How did you or do you become a part of the community, and what kinds of things do you do in the individual towns that you're moving into as you expand locations?
You know, we started in a small community of Sauk City and Prairie du Sac. Today it's about 8,000 people or something like that. So 36 years. You know, that small town mentality, which I love. But I'll tell you what, you can take that same mentality into any city as well. It transfers very, very well. But that's, again, how important the leader is, the owner of the restaurants. We primarily franchise, so we're dealing with owners in our restaurants. And I've found that our team members love working alongside the owner, especially one that brings enthusiasm and energy with them. But some of the things that we do, simple things like share nights. We invite different charitable organizations into our restaurant, and we give 10% away or 50% away. I've seen it where we give 100% of sales away to an organization, and we do that on a regular basis in our restaurants. A simple thing, and not all of our, especially our new operators, they can't necessarily write a check to different charitable organizations. But, there's nothing like giving your time. The most important thing I personally have is my time. And it's it's easier for me to write a check, as a matter of fact. Giving of your time, that's very important to me. But for our operators, they can do that. They can give of their time to different organizations in their community. It's just, just by being a good person and doing the right thing. And when you're outside of your restaurant, I can't believe you can be two different people. You still got to be that good person when you're in the grocery store, walking down the aisle and saying hi to that person. You may not know them, but why not say hi or how you doing or whatever? Just being a good person. And nothing wrong with wearing your logo on your shirt also, so they know where the heck you're from. And hand out some coupons while you're doing it. My friends at Chick-fil-A, they're well known for that, and I do the same thing.
So I'm curious, Craig, obviously your business was already built for takeout and carry out. Dave, yours had fewer drive-through going into this. How have you seen digital play a bigger role for your restaurants, and do you think that will stick as people start to move back to whatever post-COVID normal looks like?
Yeah, when my parents start ordering food from digitally, then it's become something different than it ever was. I think a lot of digital is sticky, and we were fortunate that we already had a large part of our business that was digital, Wendy, and we invested quite a bit in that in the last couple of years. We skew Generation Z, we skew towards a younger audience as well. So we absolutely believe that it's going to continue to be a very sticky part of the business. And as dining comes back, I think that gives us more encouragement of the trajectory of not just ourselves, but the industry as a whole.
Kelli, from the research, what are you seeing in terms of number of restaurants that have adopted digital that before were not digitally enabled? Do you all track that in Black Box?
We track at a macro level the adoption rates, of different age groups and demographics. And Dave, you're absolutely right. Gen Z, millennials actually had a greater increase in the adoption rates. And yes, then the boomers and even the older, the next generation started to adopt it more. So we've tracked the adoption rates, and we also can track and know that obviously it has been all about, how do you connect if you can't connect directly or the same way you used to? And again, in the case of if you have a drive-through or you had big off-premise presence, then it was easier. But what we've seen is just the amount of grit and determination and resilience of the operators is, let me find a way to connect in any way possible. So, it's actually, there's not as many barriers to entry in terms of launching a digital, whether it's a digital brand or just getting your brand out there digitally. But that is, the ones that are doing that are doing better, or the ones that had a running start, right? A head start on, we had already converted a lot of if they were a media brand and started to pivot to digital in the way of connecting that way, or increasing their social presence prior to this pandemic. They are in, we can see across the board, in a better state, if you will. But there's still room and there's still time to think about, how do I, again, connect if I can't do it the way I used to, or if it's not in a dining room? How do people connect to my brand? Where's the emotional connection to my brand? And what of the resources that I have already can I push into that digital footprint and expand it? I hope that answered your question.
That does. That's really helpful. And, question I would have for all of you, and I know one of the things that from a supplier standpoint that we really struggle with is the normal way to meet and greet and connect with customers as you travel out, or you're at large industry trade events to be able to look at new innovation and create conversation. Both of those activities have been significantly disrupted. How do you see new innovation now? How would you best want a supplier to connect with you? What do you think the future of trade shows and industry events looks like in a post-COVID world?
Well, I hope they don't go away. If nothing else, I like seeing the people that I've known for years. But that's what happens when you get older. You go to see people you haven't seen in a while. I do know that, Culver's, we need to beef up on the technology side of our business. We certainly found that out during this event. Mobile ordering, we only had it really in a couple dozen restaurants, and so we got caught. We really got caught. But what we found is our operators, they're ingenious in what they can do. They're very creative, and they figured out double drive-throughs and breaking the line at the drive-through. We regularly have cars out to the highway. We've had the sheriff's department and the local police come to us and say, "Hey, you guys got to be faster because we can't have those cars out in the highway backed up like that." So we've got to beef up on our technology side of our business and become far better at it. Yet, I don't want to lose any of the core stuff that we have. I just think that is also important, and I don't think we have to either. But we've got to get better on the technology side.
Hey, Dave, how have your food service distributors partnered with you differently in this environment?
I think Craig said the amount of effort and work that has been done from supply chain partners, our own internal team, as well as the external partners. It's been remarkable. Like, I know there was a time frame very early on where we were all worried about how food service industry would ultimately be able to act, and would there be a major supply chain disruption. I mean, if those of you that remember, just a few weeks into the pandemic, people were worried about Wendy's getting burgers, and so you wondered what was the next shoe to drop. I think everybody has been ingenious. I mean, it's something you can't take away from this industry in terms of how innovative this industry can be, and the amount of problem solving and people dropping everything they're working on to make sure they shift product one area to another area. We've encountered a lot of things that we have, Craig, in terms of substitutions and having to be a little bit off the normal routine, but everybody, has been incredibly innovative in problem solving, and the customers 100%.
How about for your business, Craig?
I look at our distributors as heroes, just like I look at my team members. Those drivers doing what they do and then unload hundreds of pieces off the trucks into the restaurants. As a matter of fact, I sent a message to our major distributor and just calling out their drivers and saying thank you to them. They were over the top and still are. And, don't forget about those people. They are true heroes. And anybody on the front lines anywhere, they are heroes. But our distributors they were working their butts off. They just were working their butts off and doing whatever it took. Yes, we ran out of things, but they were right there with us and trying to get things back in the stores and stuff, and they've been remarkable over this period of time, as they were prior, as a matter of fact.
So I'm curious, Kelli, what is your biggest prediction for 2021?
Biggest prediction.
And if you pull out a magic 8-ball and shake it right now, it doesn't count.
I'm wishing I had one right now. I think biggest prediction, well, I like everyone else, want to see a vaccine in place and inoculation happen so that people get back to the joy that you really can experience in eating out or grabbing food in whatever form you want with family and friends. So I don't know that I have a prediction. I think a lot of the trends we've talked about have stayed in place. I think when it feels safe, you will see people return to that joy. biggest thing. I also think the Dave mentioned this, Craig has mentioned innovation, it will be important again. Locally sourced will be important again. It may not be, it's not top of mind today because safety is and cleanliness is. So as those things curtail and people start to feel safe again, my prediction is, joy returns, but innovation will matter again. So take the time now to be thinking about what that, should look like and when. Locally sourced and diversity in the way you do things and community will truly be, again, the same differentiator. I often say lean into your purpose more than ever now, because those things absolutely, they always matter. But if you continue to lean into that, you kind of will end up in a really great place when this is all said and done. I don't know if that's a cheat answer or not, because it's not one thing, but that's a hard question.
Well, I won't ask you about world peace then, so I will leave that.
I answered that earlier, by the way.
You did. Dave, what's your big prediction for 2021?
My two boys will be going back to in-school learning, even if I have to build a school myself. That's for sure. That's for sure going to happen. I bet that actually the overall restaurant sales in the back half of 2021 are greater than what they were during the back half of 19. I think that there will be there's definitely going to be disruption. There's definitely going to be displacement. It's painful to see what's happening, and certainly concepts like ourselves, Culver's, will be beneficiaries and able to grow at a more rapid rate. But you'll also see some great innovation of new concepts coming out of the ground. And I bet it's actually going to be, especially that back half, a banner year for restaurants.
How about your predictions, Craig?
The restaurant industry is alive and well, and it's gonna explode again. It is gonna explode. But one thing I would sure like to see is the diversity in our nation and at Culver's be greater than what it is. Growing up in a small town that I grew up in and starting the business here, it's not a very diverse community, and unfortunately that probably carried over in our business over the years. Well, we're working hard to change that, and that's very, very important. And Culver's will be a better place. The industry will be a better place. The world will be a better place. There's that world peace thing, by the way, and it's just so important that we get along with each other. We work with each other. We learn to love each other. We learn to listen to one another, and we'll be just fine. But we're going to be fine in the restaurant industry. I have no doubts about that.
Yeah, and I do think, to Craig's point, the winners on the diversity front are going to be those that aren't saying things just because it's the right soundbite or the thing that you should feel like you should put up on social media, but they actually live it. They follow through and they actually take this opportunity to change. Craig said, this is our time to shine. This is our time to change also.
Yeah, the level of within Kellogg's, and we look at consumer sentiment, especially younger generations look very closely at the transparency between what you say and what you do. And it started a couple of years ago where we would see things around the sales of pink goods during Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but those were companies that didn't have very female-friendly policies. This year, we're seeing an elevated push around diversity and inclusion and really younger consumers challenging companies that don't have diverse leadership teams or good diverse policies, but have come out with very public statements, but yet their people practices don't match that. So I think you're absolutely right, both Dave and Craig, that it will become that much more important, and people will vote with their pocketbook easily.
I agree with you. I agree.
So any last words of advice for the audience on how to navigate post-COVID and how to be a leader in our individual spaces and industries?
It's so simple. Just do the right thing. Really? Come on. We know what the right thing is to do. We all do. Just do it. And it'll work out. It will.
Kelly?
Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
I actually, I think I probably said it, and I would say it as Dave has said it too, in terms of the word restaurant. It has nothing to do with food. It actually, the French word that means to provide for, to restore. It's about restoration. It is often not about food, and many times the reasons people come to a restaurant is not about food. It's another reason. So I think to that higher purpose and higher calling, and lean into those values that you have as an organization, and it will be all right. It absolutely will be. And just continue to take care of teams at a time when they need it more than ever.
What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the energy level, the excitement for the future of Noodles is higher than I've ever seen it. But the amount of fatigue, the amount of anxiety that is going on in our world and our team members, doing the right thing, as Craig said, taking care of your people, as Kelly said, that's going to win.
Well, thank you. And I don't know if Chris, do we have any other questions from the audience?
So we do have one question, just from Pat Mulhern, asking Dave and Craig if they think their counterparts will be as transparent in helping the industry recover.
I do.
Are they going to share those innovations with their partners, I should say?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, we are a competitive bunch, aren't we?
Yeah.
We are competitive. But yeah.
No, Craig's obviously grown up in this industry. I've been in this industry and in this business for a very long time, and our heart is very much in this industry. And so while we're as competitive a group of people as you'll ever see in your life, and I'm sure Craig wants Culver's to beat the hell out of Noodles, and I would the same. We love this industry, and we will certainly do what we can to help it reach back to those levels.
Our industry loves people probably more than any other industry. We love people. We're people. And it's hard, very hard not to like someone else. It is for me anyway. But yeah, Dave, you're right. We're competitive. We want to win, of course. But I'm never going to wish something bad on one of my competitors. Never. It just makes, hopefully it makes us stronger, and they make us stronger, and they make us work harder for what we hopefully will earn. So, no, we're people.
I think Mr. Rogers has a saying that I still follow, which is, there's not somebody you can't learn to love once you've learned their story. And that's the restaurant space for sure.
Yeah.
I love that. A few years ago, we were in Silicon Valley meeting with a variety of startups. They were all co-located in the same space. And we asked, well, you're sitting right next to people who are starting up a business that plays in the same space you are. And the look across the table, and the gentleman said, well, we value collaboration over competition. And I think that's how I've always experienced food service, is the value of collaboration, innovation, entrepreneurial approach. And as the water rises, we all win, really benefits food service. Any last words, Ms. Kelly? Oh, sorry, Craig.
I've got a question to all of you. In your corporate headquarters, your support center, whatever you call it, you have people back in the building?
On a very limited basis. We have in the corporate offices, no more than 15% are approved to be in the building at any given time. And we don't anticipate more than that until after the first of the year.
Anybody else?
Go ahead, Kelly.
We're a very small company, but we are not back in our offices. We're doing everything just like this, remote, Zoom,
Yeah, well,
and it's working.
okay.
Yeah, very similar on our side. Certainly the culinary teams need to get into the test kitchen, and certain departments are in there more often than others, but very similar.
It's hard to come out with new products if we're not back in our offices, and we're like you guys right now. We're working primarily remote, and you know what? It's killing me. It's just killing me. I apologize. I'm sorry.
Nope, I think we all miss the interaction for sure.
Absolutely.
And I hate to cut this off, but we are at the time limit, essentially, especially since it was such a lively discussion. But I would like to thank all of our presenters today for coming on, giving their time today, all of our guests, and also DMA for hosting. Just want to remind everyone that after a processing period, there will be a recording of this webinar sent to all registrants. So keep an eye in your inbox for that. But I think we're about done here today. So I'd like to thank everyone again and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You too.
Thank you. Thank you.